Have you noticed how the desire for economic forecasts surges right when our ability to accurately forecast plummets? Well, that's really the case today, isn't it? In today's show, I'm going to tell you what I say when people ask me, what's going to happen to our property markets? Are property values really going to crash? And my answer may surprise you. I'm also going to share my mindset moment with you that, believe it or not, you're making history. And then I have a chat with Dr. Andrew Wilson about the question of, well, who's going to pay for all these government benefits, all these government handouts? And I ask him to explain a bit more about what quantitative easing is. Yes, another episode focused on coronavirus, but I'm going to give you some different information today. So at the end of today's show, you're going to get some clarity and some certainty about your economic futures. So welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 5th time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future, and it's even harder to predict the endpoint of a moving target. Yet, as somebody who's meant to know a bit about the property markets, I'm regularly asked, how's all this going to play out? What's going to happen to our property markets? Are house prices really going to crash like some of those doomsayers are telling us? Now, of course, I realise there are some commentators out there who are making predictions, but my answer when people ask me those questions is, I really don't know. Now, I realise that's not a satisfactory answer. By the way, no one else really knows the answers either. Yet, at times like this, most of us are looking for someone to tell them what's going to happen next. Of course, I wish I knew the answers. I really do. All I can say is, I don't know. Now, I don't really know how this virus is going to play out. I don't know how long our lockdown is going to last. I don't know what the economic fallout is. But here's a few things I do know. I hear you say, at least he does know something. I do know there are many commentators out there who are trying to compare this to the global financial crisis or the depression of the early 1990s. But this time it's actually very different. We're in uncharted waters. This is a health crisis, and our government has severely restricted our mobility and put our economy, our businesses and our property markets into hibernation to prevent the terrible human disaster that's happened to overseas in many countries. I also know the governments around the world have never, ever made such a concerted effort to minimise the economic downside. And I also know the Australian government's thrown trillions of dollars, everything including the kitchen sink, to minimise the economic pain for businesses, for the people, and to protect our health. And I know our property markets have gone into hibernation. And this will actually prevent a free fall of property values, as there aren't going to be many forced sales this time round, particularly since the banks are providing a pillar of support for homeowners, and property investors can take loan holidays or loan deferrals for up to 6 months. So these measures should delay distressed sales that would otherwise occur that may, if not protected this way, flood our property markets. Sure, transaction levels are going to be significantly impacted over the next few months, particularly with the restrictions placed on limiting people's ability to leave their homes or to view properties or to have public auctions. But this doesn't mean that property values are going to plummet. So while property values may fall a little in the next few months, that really won't be a reflection of their true intrinsic value, but more a reflection of the market lockdown. And then, sooner rather than later, we're going to come to a point when transactions are going to suddenly rise. And there's all of a sudden going to be an increase in property values. They're going to reflect the fundamentals of the Australian economy as opposed to the current structural changes that are taking place. On the flip side of this, suppressed transaction activity means we can expect to see a built-up latent demand, as has always happened during times like this, and our property markets are going to rebound in the second half of this year. Hey, here's something else I know. I know that what we're going through currently is temporary, like every other crisis that we've been through before. And I also know this is going to pass. And I know our property markets, without warning, without anyone ringing a bell, are going to resume their uptrend. And most people won't recognise this until the markets are well and truly on the move, just like what happened a year or so ago in the middle of last year. Before it actually even happened before the federal election last year. And we also know, based on history, we're entering a zone of opportunity. Hey, maybe I was wrong, because I started off by saying I don't know what's ahead. But having now told you all this, and actually I've got a couple of more concepts I'd like to share with you, I realised that maybe I know more than I thought I did. I know that currently people are feeling very anxious, very scared, very uncertain. Look, by the way, it's okay. It's normal. But it would be very wrong to act on these emotions. We've all heard Warren Buffett wisely say, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. That's easy to say, but it's not easy to do, is it? However, I've seen many otherwise intelligent, rational people make terrible investment mistakes when the market sentiment got to them and they tried to fix short-term problems with what ended up being long-term disasters. The emotions took over them. Now, I remember just before the election last year, about a year ago, we had so many of our clients at Metropole who had bought properties who wanted to get out of the market, actually leading up to the 6-9 months before the election. Everyone was, once their properties became vacant between tenants, everyone was looking for an excuse to get out of the market. And for the majority of them, we were able to convince them it was the wrong thing to do. We'd tell them, don't make long-term decisions based on the last 30 minutes of news. But there were some who wouldn't take our advice and sold out. And now the property values have gone up 10-15%. And sure, they're going to drop again a little bit, but all the property values made up their lost ground and they reached new peaks, and the same's going to happen again. Hey, by the way, here's a few more things I do know. I'm chatting with you in April 2020, and I know there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. I know it's a tough place to be. I know that people just aren't sure what's going to happen. They're looking for a level of certainty. But there are a couple more certainties I can provide for you. And if you've listened to these podcasts before, please bear with this as I remind you again of one of the certainties, that it's actually going to be April 2021 in 12 months' time. I know that for certain. I also know that sometime between now and then, and I don't know when it is, could be 6 weeks, could be 6 months, I don't think it will be, but some point between now and then, we're going to cross a survival line. And this survival line is going to occur when people's level of desire to move forward overtakes their fears. As I've mentioned before, it's really where fear and greed tip over, and greed takes over from fear. And we know the government's helping us build a bridge to get across that survival line with all its various support mechanisms. And by the way, here's another certainty. On the other side of that survival line, there's going to be great opportunities to thrive in property, in businesses, in your profession. Having spoken to many property investors and business owners and entrepreneurs recently, though, I'm finding they're thinking in 3 different ways. There are some of those who are fear-focused. They're panicking, they're frozen, they think the world's coming to an end. They've got a short-term focus. They don't have that long-term focus to even see across to that survival line. So they're closing down their businesses. And some are even thinking of selling up their investments. Don't do that. Well, it's not the right time. See, these people just can't see a future, and that's a real tragedy, because some of those just won't make it to the survival line, which, as I said, could be here sooner than you think. There's another group of business people, entrepreneurs, investors who are just bunkering down. They've gone into hibernation mode. You know, they're buying all the rice and pasta and toilet paper they can and stay low. They want to ride it out. And when they cross the survival line, and they will, they're going to experience a lot of ups and downs between now and then, by the way. When they cross that survival line, they're going to lose a year or so of their life. But there's a small group of strategic investors and business owners and entrepreneurs that I've been speaking to who are positioning themselves for the future. They recognise that currently there's a strategic window, a time between now and when that survival line takes over. You know, we're going to cross that bridge. They're going to see that there's a window of opportunity to take advantage, because they get themselves set, because they know there are going to be some great opportunities coming up already, and even more so once the world moves on. See, they're not trying to time the market. They want to take advantage of the opportunities the market's currently offering, and property investors who are cashed up who have got finance, who have got secure jobs. And remember, the vast majority of Australians still have got jobs and secure jobs. They're taking advantage not of people, but of the opportunities the market's offering them. They know that when people eventually come out of lockdown and get on with their lives, that the property market's going to pick up again and they're going to have to pay more for properties then than they would be today. So they don't see things as being bad today, these strategic investors. They know that a lot of other people are seeing it as bad, but they're getting set. They're seeing this as a foundation stage. They recognise that how they think and what they do now, between now and that survival line, will determine their level of success when we get across, when life becomes normal again, whatever that'll be. So how are you thinking? What conversations are you having? Not just with other people, but in your mind. What are you saying to yourself? Which of those three groups of investors are you? I want you to be in that strategic group of investors who moves forward. Now, it's not easy and it's really hard to do on your own. But interestingly, my team at Metropole are helping a lot of clients. Sure, we're doing it remotely at the moment. We've been doing that for a while. We've got the technology to help people take advantage of the opportunities that are currently in the market or are going to occur in the market. See, I think if you want to take advantage of the opportunities, if you recognise that this is a time of regrowth, a rebirth, and a time to take the opportunity, you're going to need a holistic approach to your wealth creation. So you need more than a buyer's agent. You need more than a property strategist. You need a team that looks at strategic advice, wealth advisory, financial planning, property management, and I don't know about your circumstances, maybe even property renovations or development to add value during these times when there may not be as much capital growth. And that's what my team at Metropole provide. We provide a full range of professional services, and you can choose to use only some of them or the complete one-stop shop. So why not go to metropole.com.au or give us a call on 1300 Metropole, and why not get my team on your side? What would it be worth to you to have that best team on your side? One that'll customize a solution for your specific needs, because we start off by building a strategic portfolio plan for our clients so you can plan to become the person you plan to become, so you can bring your future forward and actually take advantage of the markets. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like you to take advantage of this foundation period so that, I don't know your circumstances, maybe now, maybe in 2 months, maybe in 6 months, you'll be ready before the others. So give us a call, 1300 Metropole, or go to metropole.com.au. And I'm going to be back in a moment with my Mindset Moment, and then we'll have a chat with Dr. Andrew Wilson about who's going to pay for all this.
Now here's Michael's Mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my Mindset message today, I'd like to let you know that you're making history. Yeah, believe it or not, you are making history. At the moment, you may feel stuck at home, but at least you're safe. You might feel bored or sad that you can't see your friends, but you're actually living through history. So how are you going to remember it? How are you going to remember 2020? In 1665, during the plague pandemic, Isaac Newton was stuck at home, and I read that during that time he developed the theory of gravity. So over the history, the best things have come from time and space to think and to be creative. In years to come, your children or your grandchildren are going to study this time, the time of COVID-19, and they're going to learn how rainbows were seen as a sign of hope. They're going to hear how people came together to cheer and clap those amazing people that saved lives and kept our country going. Our children are going to learn that this was a time when the world slowed down, polluted skies cleared, and animals reclaimed the streets. They're going to find out that this is a time when families spend time together, playing and having fun. It was a time when people appreciated the ability to have one walk a day. It's a time when people got to know our neighbours. It's a time when people got together and helped those in need. When they look back at history of the COVID-19 or 2020 as we're now living through, they're going to see it's a time that we realise the power of a hug, when we recognise that seeing our friends and family meant looking at them virtually on a screen. It's when schools went online And when some parents went a little bit crazy, in fact, it's a time when the whole world went crazy and stockpiled things like toilet paper. How are we going to explain that to future generations? They're going to learn that this is a time that stay at home meant you saved lives. So how are you going to remember this time? What are you going to do to leave a legacy for future generations? Here's a couple of things you might think of. Maybe you could just write a diary. Maybe you could create a scrapbook. Maybe you could create a time capsule or make a video or a film. I know lots more people are putting videos on social media. So remember, you're part of history. Stay safe, be creative, have fun, be kind, and be thankful. Well, it's been just over a month now since COVID-19 flipped our lives upside down, from having to practice social distancing, getting used to the indoors, to continuously washing our hands. And it's clear we're all going to be affected by the coronavirus, something none of us expected a few months ago. Many Australians will lose their jobs, others will have their hours curtailed, and most businesses will suffer. Right now, the government's throwing money at everything and anything in the hope of keeping the economy afloat. It's been spending close to $18 billion so far. But at some point, the lockdown is going to end. The handouts are going to stop. What happens then? Who's going to pay for all the government handouts? That's what I want to chat about today with leading economist Dr. Andrew Wilson, Chief Economist of myhousingmarket.com.au. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello, Michael. Yes, thank you.
Well, the government's introduced a whole lot of stimulus packages to minimise unemployment, to help businesses survive, to assist ordinary Australians put food on the table. And this has amounted to billions and billions of dollars. Andrew, where's the money coming from?
Well, Michael, it's extraordinary times, of course. And in a sense, we're in a position where we don't have the same economic energy or leverage, particularly with monetary policy, that we've had in other times of need. Of course, those other times of need have been economic shocks rather than the health shock we're suffering at the moment. This time, of course, in searching for stimulus, the government is restricted through the Reserve Bank, with interest rates already being at record low levels and not much left to go. Of course, the other point is that there's not much we can really do in the short term anyway, when we're all locked in. Businesses aren't operating at full capacity, most of them, of course, because most workers are now at home. And of course, that means that regardless of the stimulus packages, that it can't have an effect in that short term. Yes, Reserve Bank has met to decide the direction over April. No surprise that they're leaving interest rates at 0.25%. No point to going to zero. But of course, there are other avenues for monetary policy, and we've seen the Reserve Bank now introducing quantitative easing to try to get interest rates down even further.
So could you explain what quantitative easing is, Andrew?
It is just another mechanism to get interest rates down. Now, you would have thought that, well, isn't that what the Reserve Bank does? Yes, well, it does. It's in charge of official interest rates, which to a large degree generate mortgages and business overdrafts. There are other asset classes that have interest rate settings that are to some degree independent of official Reserve Bank settings. So what the Reserve Bank has done, and it's interesting because the Reserve Bank doesn't actually have any money, Michael, so it doesn't sort of move in, as we would understand it, an indebtedness position. The Reserve Bank has come along and purchased billions of dollars in 3-year government bonds from banks and major financial institutions. Now, why is it doing this? Well, what it does, of course, is if there's high demand, which clearly there is from the Reserve Bank, so as you get a higher price, a higher demand, the actual return on that bond, the yield on that bond starts to fall. So what that means is that it puts downward pressure on other asset classes, such as personal loans, credit cards, and some business financing, which of course their rates, interest rates, are much higher than mortgage rates. So it's a process of pushing down government bond yields, which works to push down interest rates in all asset classes.
So if I get it right, our government that's going to spend money supporting businesses, building those bridges as it's talking about, is going to borrow that by putting out bonds in the market. The market's going to buy those, and the Reserve Bank is keeping the price of those bonds down.
The Reserve Bank is keeping bond yields down, and that means that the government doesn't have to pay as much interest on the money that it's essentially borrowing.
Having said that, the debt's still out there. How's it ever going to get paid back, Andrew?
Australia has been in a reasonably robust position comparatively. We would have likely, without the coronavirus, been in a surplus this year. And we look at other countries that are in significant deficits. The US is a good comparison. Pre-coronavirus, the US was running a deficit of around 4% of GDP. That was $1 trillion. So it was already in debt. So in relation to our position, and that's important internationally, we were a positive country in terms of our indebtedness, our government indebtedness. So that means going forward, any imbalances in terms of that international indebtedness, which show up in things like our currency, will have a reasonably neutral effect. And any sense of having to repay the debt is a simplistic view of the way our government balance sheets work. Going forward, all governments are going to be in significant debt. It will keep our currencies, I guess, reasonably stable in this sort of virtual world of everybody being in the same boat.
But it's brought out the doomsayers, the naysayers, the people from overseas who say the debt is so big it's going to collapse. And I told you so. They told us that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, and now they're saying it again.
Cheap headlines, Michael. It's clickbait. It's up to the people to buy into this rubbish. We've got bigger things to worry about at the moment, Michael, than the usual panoply of pin-headed doomsayers that come out of the woodwork under these circumstances, looking for a cheap headline. We'll move forward. It'll be a journey. We've never experienced this before. This is not an economic shock, and it's going to take a lot of work to get back to where we were. When we do get back to that, Michael, things will look a lot different and be a lot different than we've been used to before in terms of our economy and our social structure as well. But again, as I've said before, Michael, being in Australia is probably the country you'd want to be in for a number of reasons. Small population, still have very strong resource capacity. And given that, I think that we'll be able to move through in better shape than most, if not all, from these extraordinary circumstances.
The trouble is forecasters can't forecast at the moment because you correctly say there's just not enough current information about it or any historic information to help us. But some are suggesting this is going to lead to inflation, and that's one way we're going to eventually repay our debt. What are your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Well, bring on the inflation, Michael. Inflation is a reflection of high demand and prices growing. Bring it on, and bring on higher interest rates. A lot of our economic dialogue and analysis over almost the last decade has proven to be totally wrong. A lot of economists and policymakers are fixated on economic dogma, and that's proven to be wrong. I'm concerned at the level of not just government policy making, but also the level of debate and economic analysis that passes for, I guess, intelligent response to what's happening in our economy. And I think that's another thing that'll change going forward from this, is that we're going to start to really re-examine some of the fundamentals of macroeconomic policy, particularly monetary policy. And that's a good thing because we won't be a hostage to the gobbledygook that we've been a hostage to from our policymakers over the last decade particularly. But I just want to say something about quantitative easing, Michael. The issue with focusing on interest rates is it just hasn't worked since the GFC. Low interest rates haven't produced anything that we would have expected them to produce in previous cycles. And this is why those predictions from economists and commentators will be wrong again, because they were wrong since the GFC. So what's going to happen now, Michael, with interest rates being forced down even lower, is I believe we're not going to get the same drive again that we've had through lower interest rates anyway. And the reason is that we don't have incomes growth to support those lower interest rates. People aren't going to take advantage of low interest rates if their incomes are stagnant. And of course, with people out of work now and sadly more to lose their jobs perhaps over the longer term, businesses going under, income is going to be the real problem here in the economy, again, as it has been, but it's accentuated. So it's not much good if you've got really low interest rates, A, if you haven't got a job, and B, if you haven't got the money to take advantage of it.
And the other factor, of course, is confidence. So you need the ability to pay for things with job growth and wages growth. I agree with that. But once we come out of this, confidence will be shot for a while.
That's right, Michael, and it'll be a journey for a couple of months. Let's just hope that the government can bring us back into more of a normal working environment sooner rather than later, because the longer we're in it, the more damage over the longer term we're going to do, and that is of great concern to me.
Well, the government's more recently suggested that it is balancing the two things, the health of our nation and the economy of our nation, and it is a balancing act, as we've mentioned before in these chats, and at some stage they're going to have to forego one to keep the economy working. But I have faith, maybe not in our government, but in humanity, and I think we're going to come through this. So I look forward to chatting again with you next week about this. There's always new things to talk about, Andrew.
There is, and I agree with you completely, Michael. We'll come through it, but Australians know how to do the hard yards. We'll do the hard yards, and we'll succeed.
As we come close to the end of another show, I'd like to ask you a favour. If you got some benefit from today's show, please share it with somebody else. My aim is to make as many people as possible financially fluent, to see them through not just these difficult times, but the good times that we're going to get once we cross that survival line I mentioned to you today. So there's a share button on all podcast apps, or just tell somebody about the Michael Yardney podcast. And if you enjoyed what you heard, why not tell the world and leave a review? Because if you leave a review on your favourite podcast app and I read it out, I'm going to give you one of my books, as I will for Francesco. He just left a short one. It can be short, it can be long, it can be 1 star, it can be 5 stars, as many as you like, even though they all seem to be 5 stars, and I really appreciate that. But Francesco said, Michael, you give great advice and appreciate your hard work in delivering value. Thank you. Well, thank you, Frankie Oz, who left a message on Apple Podcasts. If you email me, michael@metropole.com.au, I'll give you a gift as a way of saying thank you. I'll be back again real soon. Remember, twice a week this podcast comes out to help you make the most of the property markets, money, finance, and your success. But in between, you can catch me on all the social media platforms. Why not follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram? Instagram I'm having a bit of fun with at the moment. So shout out and say hello. In the meantime, I'll be back real soon. Have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?